So it's time to change out the plenum plate. And you can see here I'm going to be changing out a lot of other things while I'm doing this job, just given how much I'm going to have to take apart. So got new spark plugs, wires, idler arm, pulley, and then the thermostat housing. And then here's the Hughes engine plenum plate. Comes with the gasket as well, so going to be changing all of this out. First thing I'm doing is I'm going to drain all of the coolant out of the system. So you can see here I got a bucket right here. Took off the little bleeder valve. Make sure to remove the radiator cap to help with the flow. So getting all the coolant out since we're going to be having to take some hoses off. Next, I'm going to remove the air box. Using a flathead screwdriver to undo this bracket. Now I should be able to just pop this guy off. Now I'm going to drain all the oil out of the engine. So I drained all the oil and took the filter out. Now I'm going to remove the entire battery so it's out of the way. Next I'm going to disconnect this hose from the radiator. And this guy should just pop right off. Now to give myself room, I'm going to remove this fan shroud. So I'm going to unplug this and then drain all the fluid out of it. Now I just need to disconnect the coolant reservoir. Using a 13mm, I'm going to remove the bolts to the fan. Now with those bolts removed, I can move the fan blade back and pull the shroud out. So now I just got to remove all the bolts holding the fan shroud on. Now with all the bolts removed, I can pull this fan shroud out. So I'll just push it towards the engine and then out. Now with the shroud out of the way, I can stand right in here and work on the engine, so it makes it a lot easier to get to everything I need to get to. Next, I'm going to remove the fan belt, so pulling this back and taking this off. Now I can slip this right out. Now since I'm removing this pulley, using a flathead to take this little box off. Now with that out of the way, I can just remove this nut that's holding it on. So using a 5/8, just slipping that over the top here. Now just undoing it with my fingers. Now I can screw in the new one. Super easy to change out. Next, we'll need to remove this guy to be able to get the bolt underneath it. Just gonna put this box back on. So just a flathead screwdriver. And there we go. Now, since we're going to be taking all this off, got to unplug all the plugs that go to the throttle. And here's a look inside my throttle. You can see all the oil that's piled up in there. Now we need to disconnect all these wires that hook into the throttle body. So these just pop right off. There's 3 of them. And then next we're going to need to remove all the bolts. And there we go. Now we can get the throttle body out of the way. We can clean this guy up. And now this little metal bracket will disconnect the back wire and move that out of the way. But first, you can see again all the oil that's on the plate from being sucked into the intake. So definitely glad that we're taking care of this. Using needle nose pliers to pinch the clip and pull the throttle cable out of this bracket so we can move it out of the way. Now going to remove the vacuum line that goes into the intake, move that out of the way. Now I'm undoing the clamp for the hose, and this should just wiggle right off. There we go. Next I'm removing this bolt to the plate up here on top of the intake. There's 2 of them. So I'll remove this bolt, and then there's a few more that we need to take out to swing this whole thing out of the way. So you can see the 3 down there. And then there's 1 in the middle, there's 1 holding this dipstick, and then 1 underneath the alternator. So I got these 3 taken out, and then there's 1 right here that I'm taking out. Now I need to disconnect everything, so disconnecting the plugs to the alternator. So that just slips off there once you take the nut off. So you can see it's loose now. So the last one that I pulled out in the middle was underneath the idler pulley, and then we just got to take out the bolt that goes to this dipstick, and we'll be able to swing this whole thing over. There are 2 plugs to the AC compressor we'll have to undo, so that one pops out. This one, you gotta take this red tab out, and then it'll come off. And then finally, just this bolt on the side that holds the dipstick, and then we'll be able to swing this whole thing out of the way. Alright, so I have this off to the side, so that way it's out of the way, and then I'm standing right here to where I can get to everything. So we're going to be replacing this, we're going to be cutting that out. But first I'm going to be undoing all these plugs to the fuel injectors. So again, these guys can be a little stubborn. As you can see there, it took a lot of force to get it off. So I'm going to work around here and take all of these plugs out. So I'm using a flathead to pop them out. So again, these fuel injector plugs were pretty stubborn to take off. I think I broke most of the little red retainer clips, but shouldn't be an issue. Now I need to disconnect the fuel line. So I have this little yellow clip here that I pushed in to be able to take that off. Next, I'm undoing the bolts here to take the actual fuel rail off. Now that I got those out, just gonna put these off to the side. Now that I got it popped out of both sides, gonna leak a little bit of fuel as there's still some in the system. And we're just gonna take this completely out and put it off to the side. So with that out of the way, we can undo both of these lines that go into the intake and push these out of the way. Now we're almost to the part to take the whole intake out, but first gotta take this off. So undo the clamp, you can either cut it or just pull it off. And then I'm gonna take out this housing, as well as the sensor that goes into the intake, and then this guy as well we're going to undo and take off. Now with everything unhooked and undone, we can go around and take out all of these bolts that go around the intake manifold. And there we have it. So now with that out of the way, this is a good time to change out the spark plugs as well as the distributor cap. So I lined it with some shop towels, and then we're going to need to just kind of clean around here and get this surface very clean for when we put the intake back on. So doing this job by myself, I just put the intake right here on the corner of the truck as I took it off. There we go. So here's a good side-by-side of the old plate next to the new aluminum plate. You can see the gasket just being pulled completely through. So really happy we're changing this guy out. Now with that off, just going to wipe the surface down really good around it. Next, I'm going to hit this with the power washer and just get as much grime out as possible. Just use some liquid dish soap on it and then let it sit and then sprayed it down. So you can see it's gotten a lot of grime off. And here's it out in the sun. It looks a lot better after power washing it and scrubbing it down with some soap. And here's the inside of it after power washing it really good. So see on the side here where the old gaskets were, you're going to need to take a razor blade to take those off. But after that, should be good to go. So I went ahead and took off the valve covers as well, and just wanted to clean those up really good, given I'm cleaned everything up at this point, just to make the engine look really nice. So not a bad idea. Here's the valve covers. So just going to use some brake cleaner and some engine degreaser and then power wash it after. Now with the intake manifold all cleaned up, got the gasket lined up, and we're going to be putting on the aluminum plate. So getting this lined up good with the holes. So put in all the new bolts and then torqued them down to spec at 72 inch-pounds. Now I'm putting the intake back in, and you can see I cut off the head of an old bolt to be able to line this up perfectly. So using a dab of gasket maker, you can see on both sides there and then on the front as well. Now I have all the gaskets lined up and ready to go. So again, using that cut-off screw to be able to line it up perfectly. And there we go. So I was able to line that guy up perfectly, and this sticks out just enough for me to be able to just undo this with some pliers. Now I'm just going to be tightening all these bolts down and then torquing them down to spec. So I'm going to run a time lapse of putting this all back together. And there we go. So have everything back on and put back together. So now I'm going to be putting this coolant hose back on, moving this back over and back into place. Now that I have that in place, I rehooked in all the bolts, hooked up the alternator, AC compressor plugs, and we are almost done. Now I have the throttle body back on, all the throttle cables hooked in, and then I have the fuel line back on, everything plugged in. Just need to reconnect a couple hoses here, and we should be in a great spot to finish this guy up. Now I just need to reconnect this pulley. So this is the new one that I'm putting in. Just torque that guy down real good. Next, I just need to put the serpentine belt back on. So getting this slipped over the top here. And there we go. Now I can put the fan shroud back in, slipping it past the fan and into place here. Now the fan shroud's in, all the hoses are connected up, so last thing I need to do is just fill this thing with coolant. So I definitely recommend you change out your O2 sensors. So you can see this one pretty fouled up, and then here's it next to the new one. Probably original, so needed to get changed out anyway. Now I got the truck running, so just filling it up with coolant while I let this run to just let it cycle into the whole system. After driving the truck a couple 100 miles, this is what we're looking like inside, so super happy about that. Really hope this video is helpful if you're planning on changing out your Plenum plate. Not a hard job to do, can do with some basic hand tools, so please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, guys.